Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby, live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Hump Day. That's right, middle of the week, downhill slide to Firearms Friday. It is the middle of the week, and we are ready to go. We've got a fun show lined up for you today. We're going to get into that here in just a moment. But again, notification. We will be. Wanted to be very specific about that. We will be. The show will be off the air on Friday. We will be back on Monday. But we are taking that Friday off. This coming Friday, no Firearms Friday, no nothing else. You'll be alternate programming wherever you're listening. I don't know if it's Gallagher or America This Week or whatever is going to be going on. It's going to be alternate programming wherever you're listening to the show. And I wanted to give you the heads up early, so that I don't get a bunch of text messages and other stuff on Friday morning about how we're not on the air because of stuff and things and reasons. It's my birthday. I got stuff going on, folks. So decided that as a birthday present to myself, I would sleep in a little bit on Friday and then spend times with the family. And we're gonna be doing some fun stuff around the old homestead this weekend. And so trying to take just a little bit of time because we're running out of daylight. I don't want to be that guy, but the days are getting shorter. Woke up this morning and I had to turn the lights off in the house to be able to look out over the hills because I couldn't even see the hills this morning. And so getting darker, getting a little cooler. Somebody said it was 33 degrees or something yesterday in the interior yesterday morning out at Salcha. I think it was Mike who said it was 31, 32 degrees in Salcha. So yeah, we're rapidly starting to run out of all that good summer goodness. And so I want to get a little bit of it as we go on here, before we run out, because it's a finite supply. We only get so much summer, and I'm going to try and get a little bit of it here before we go too far along. So anyway, no show on Friday, but we will be back on Monday, and then we've got all next week, and then the following week, of course, is Memorial Day or is Labor Day weekend, and we will be off the air on Labor Day as well. So I know 2 days off in a single month. What was I thinking? Anyway, that's what's going on here as we cruise ahead into the end of summer here. So just FYI. So you guys have all the information you need. Today on the program, we're going to be diving into some of the headlines this morning in this first segment, and then we're going to laser focus down on what happened exactly during the 26-minute special session. Because was it 26 or 22? It was fast. And we're going to go through the minority lawmakers who voted to override the governor. And we're going to get their reasoning behind why they decided to vote against the governor. And we're going to talk about that here in the last two segments of the show this morning and kind of go over that. It's going to take a little bit of time, and we'll discuss it. Then in hour two, I have invited Representative Kevin McCabe on. He was on last month, I guess, middle of last month. So I thought it was appropriate to bring him back on because he has been writing a lot of good pieces for Must Read Alaska. And he's continuing to talk about my favorite current topic, which is the Alaska education system. And his latest piece in Must Read, which came out just a few days ago, Alaska's education crisis demands reform, not just more money. And I think you can tell by the headline that he probably was not a fan of overriding the governor's vetoes. But we'll talk about that in hour two. Kevin McCabe will be joining us to discuss those things and more. All right. So let's start off with some headlines from around the state. Now, it's being reported by pretty much everyone at this point that President Trump and Vladimir Putin will be meeting here in Alaska, and that it will take place at J-Bear, Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. It really emerged as the only viable location. According to the reports from CNN and others, the White House advance team reportedly contacted places all over the state, Juneau, Anchorage, Fairbanks, but the organizers soon realized that only Anchorage could meet the logistical and security needs of such a fast-paced deal. Now, normally, such meetings between, the leader of the free world and another major world leader takes a lot of time on the ground. We're talking like months of prep and haggling and everything else. But the president is famous for this kind of style where he just wants to just rip and read. You know what I mean? He wants to get in there and get it done. Now, this will be the first meeting between Putin and Trump. Between the leaders, I guess I should say, of both nations. Not necessarily specifically Trump and Putin themselves, in 4 years. They're still finalizing the details. But everybody is reporting as of right now that it's going to take place on J-Bear, which ultimately is going to tie up a lot of the traffic and stuff at the Anchorage area for people transiting and traveling to back and forth to Wasilla. Probably look for some delays on that. But this wasn't really the first choice, by the way. The White House had hoped to avoid, according to some of the reporting in CNN, they'd hoped to avoid the optics of hosting the Russian leader on a U.S. military base. I think they wanted to do it in more of kind of a public type location. But again, very, very difficult to do that when you've got the tensions that are going on around the world right now. Very difficult. So anyway, it's going to be Friday. They'll be up in J-Bear doing their thing. And so we'll see what comes out of that meeting. Although apparently I just was seeing, according to the headlines that I've seen, I haven't read the articles, but there's been several headlines about how the president has softened his tone and lowers expectations for his meeting and does all this other kind of stuff. And even Must Read is reporting that this is more of a listening session. He wants to feel out without expectations, which I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see. This is all, of course, after there was a major breakthrough on the Ukrainian front day before yesterday. And apparently they poured another 100,000 Russian troops into the Ukrainian border. So, I mean, it doesn't sound like Putin's slowing down prior to this meeting. We'll have to see what happens with this, but the world is watching. The world is watching. So we'll see what comes out of that. Interesting take. Apparently, the Times radio interview. This is from the picked up a face-to-face with Bill Wielechowski, the Democrat from Anchorage. And he told, now the Times Radio is a British outlet. And apparently he got a whole bunch of softball questions and is painted Alaska in kind of this really weird light because he told the audiences that Alaska does not like Trump. And of course, anything that Wielechowski said, the interviewer didn't push him or question him. It was all softball stuff. He said Alaskans don't like Trump, even though Trump won Alaska by 54%. There was not even a ranked choice runoff. I mean, it was just he outright won the state. And then he was asked about the stand-up Alaska protest, which is planned for this Friday at J-Bear, which good luck getting a full protest on J-Bear. Anyway, he was asked about that, and he said that he expects it to be large. And he says politically it's a purple state. And then he cited anger over Russia's invasion and a lot of things that Trump has done for, as to why this demonstration will be huge, including the loss of health care for tens of thousands of Alaskas and hundreds of millions of dollars in renewable energy projects. Again, none of these were challenged but you could tell who Bill was working for. You could tell who Wielechowski was working for. He was wearing his IBEW union labeled golf shirt at the time in the interview. You can go watch that. But then it got weird because then the Times asked, this kind of ridiculous question. What if he thought, if he thought Putin might try to take Alaska back? That was. I mean, because there's been some crazy things where people say, "Oh, Putin and Trump are meeting so that Trump can give Alaska back." I mean, then Wielechowski got all, then he got all, well, Alaskans are well armed and they would fight aggression. Which again, I would say, yeah. I mean, if you've seen Afghanistan, good luck with that. Although Downing goes on to say, as though hunting rifles might go up against a Russian MiG firing missiles. Again, I don't know again, Afghanistan. That's all I'm saying there. Anyway, the whole interview is just kind of a portrait of ridiculousness. But in the end, Wielechowski, he shows us all to be, we're all Democrats make up 12% of the state's electorate. Republicans make up more than that, but in the mean, this whole state is independent, undeclared, libertarian, whatever you want to call it. It's just ironic that this is the face of Alaska right now to a lot of people over there in England when they're watching this interview. It's kind of ridiculous. It's kind of ridiculous right now. Down here on the Matsu, just when you thought that it couldn't get much worse, borough voters are going to have to decide on October the 7th in the municipal election whether or not to approve a proposition to allow for an adjustment to the sales tax cap. So currently, the cap is at $500 in sales tax, meaning if you buy anything over $500, you pay a maximum of $15, right? That's where it caps out. So if you buy $1,000, it's still $15. You buy $5,000, it's still $15. And that is the maximum amount. Now that was enacted back in 1965 and has never been adjusted for inflation. According to the verbiage on the ordinance, if the cap had kept up with inflation, it would now be set at more than $5,000. That would be the cap. So Brett Johnson, who is sponsored the ordinance, apparently, anyway, if the ordinance approved by the fall, it would go into effect on the 1st, And as it is amended, it would adjust the cap every 5 years going forward, and the amount would be determined by the prior 5 years CPI of Anchorage as published by the state. And basically, it would be calculated by adding each of the 5 separate year CPI adjustments together and rounding to the nearest dollar. So if it's a 3% increase every year, it would be a 15% increase at the end of 5 years. And he says he wants to put this ordinance in to bring a better balance between sales tax and property tax. And then the ordinance notes that the borough sales tax, quote, is dedicated to schools, but has never been sufficient to solely fund schools. Therefore, property taxes have always supplemented school funding. He said the property taxes are a burden for homeowners and wrote that they contribute to the difficulty for young people to become homeowners. Oh, man, he's going to hate Chris Story's fair tax, isn't he? Anyway, there was some talking against it and everything else. Assembly Vice President Kelly Cooper is quoted in this as saying, and this is the understatement of the world. She said, I have long supported an increase to the sales tax cap. Unfortunately, the voters have spoken and they don't want an increase at this time. That's the no, they don't. I mean, have you looked around to see what it's like? No, we don't need an increase in taxes. She said, I know it's just doing the inflation proofing. I mean, that's how they're going to sell it. It's not really an increase. In fact, somebody said, who was it? Let's see. It was Johnson who said, I think that this is not an increase. This is a holding your own. You could call it's an increase, man. By simple math, it's an increase, right? But anyway, they're not confident that it's going to get through. It passed on a narrow 5-4 vote. I don't know why James Baisden voted for it, but James Baisden was one of the ones that voted for it 5-4. But that's going to be on the ballot on the 7th of October. So we'll see what that looks like as we go through. You know, apparently nobody said you should probably read the room. Meaning we're all struggling a little bit here, and an increase in the sales tax cap, probably not up there on people's bingo card to vote for this year, but we'll have to see. All right. We got more coming up. Up next, we're going to dive into the vetoes and more. We'll be back. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense, Liberty-Based, Free-Thinking Radio. Kevin McCabe, our guest in hour 2. Back with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. How you guys doing? How you doing? Huh? Feeling pretty good. Tomorrow's Friday for me. Oh, man. Sorry, I didn't mean to be that guy. Oh, yeah. Brian says then there's the advisory vote in the Matsu Borough on the fuel tax. It's going to be a raucous time in the valley. I mean, that's the thing. Are people, they're just not checking the room? I mean, looking at what's going on and all the struggles that people are having. And everybody's like, you know what? I think we should increase the taxes. What do you think? And that's the new thing. And Terry's right here. Every dime is about inflation proofing, and she's not wrong. That's everything we're hearing about now is inflation proofing. That's going to be the new mantra for the BSA and the school thing. That's going to be the new mantra for the sales tax. That's going to be a new mantra for, oh, we just can't get by on what we used to get by on because, inflation, like inflation's not hitting everyone. I mean, it's just, oh, anyway. Brian says, we have been advised not to go on base Friday. DOD civilians are work from home. Yeah, I could see that. It's going to be madness. I actually got an invite from the White House press corps to get credentials and go there. My wife is so excited. She's like, oh, I'm like, I am not going to Anchorage to sit around in the back there somewhere just for I'm not going to do it. Not going to do it. No, not going to do it. Not interested. Anyway, we'll get better seats by watching, the news media, the C-SPAN coverage of it, not news media. We won't get better coverage by the news media, but all right. Alaska loves our president. This everybody's like, let's see. Senator Bill hasn't been packing a full string of trout for years, says Willie. He's a clever guy. I mean, he's very clever. He's very politically adroit. He really can, Fat Ray says it's absolute foolishness to apply the Afghans coin war to the American people. The Afghans essentially employed the Homer Simpson boxing strategy. Americans don't have that capacity for death. I'm just saying the kind of that idea, that argument of, well, that's why we need Second Amendment to fight back against a tyrannical government. Well, how are you going to fight back against F-16s and Abrams tanks? It has been shown that asymmetrical warfare for years is the way that you hold back a larger opponent like that. So, I mean, I'm just saying Afghanistan just is an example of, I mean, look at what it was like when we were there and when we left, right? Or I just picked Afghanistan. It could be anywhere where asymmetrical warfare is being used. Melissa says, laugh my ass off. Feeling pretty good tomorrow, Friday for me. What a Duke's thing to say. True. That is true. It is a Duke's thing to say. I'm old enough to remember telling Michael all those loons invading the Matsu from Anchorage would muck it up, says Fat Ray. Yeah, I remember. And the frogs are turning gayer every day. Boy, Harold has just got some of the nastiest things to say, doesn't he? It's always personal attacks. It's never substantive, which says a lot about him as a person. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay. Are you ready? Let's dive into. There's some other stories out there, but time to get into what happened in Juneau, right? What actually went on down in Juneau during the special session, the 22 minutes? Was that what I decided it was? Because I got the message. I got the message like, I was just looking to see what time frame I got the message. That it, there we go. Message appeared at 1:52 p.m. Session started at 1:30. 1:52 p.m. BSA override passed 45-14. So, of course it did. Of course it did. 22 minutes. That's how long that special session lasted. I'm assuming they started right at 1:30, right? 22 minutes. What does it look like? And why? Why did they vote to override the governor? 10 minority lawmakers, according to the ADN, took up the views of their districts, the views of their individual districts, stretching from the Kenai to Fairbanks, mattered more than aligning with Governor Dunleavy. This is from James Brooks at the Alaska Beacon. In the Senate, Mike Kronk of Tok, James Kaufman of Anchorage, and Robert Young of Wasilla voted to override alongside members of the bipartisan majority. In the members of the minority, the yes votes came from Jeremy Bynum of Ketchikan, Julie Colomb of Anchorage, Bill Elam of Nikiski, David Nelson of Anchorage, Justin Ruffridge of Soldotna, Dan Sadler of Eagle River, and Will Stapp of Fairbanks. So they did. James Brooks, who again is probably one of the, I would argue that he and Nat Hers are probably two of the best reporters in Alaska. Although I will say, I actually went back and there was an article that somebody sent me yesterday. It was Willie, actually. Willie sent me an article all the way back from 2016 in the ADN that was talking. Remember yesterday I was talking about how Ron Duncan and GCI spent $2 million trying to influence the state. And he actually went back and found the article that I was referring to. And the article was written by Nat Hers. Nat was, the tone of the article was different. The tone of the article was more balanced, which is, anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to sidebar there, but James Brooks does a pretty good job here. So he said in post-vote interviews, 9 of the 10 minority lawmakers offered varying reasons for their vote. Now, David Nelson did not return calls or texts for seeking comment, and he has not returned messages to me either. So I don't know what's going on there. So let's get the details. Now, Jeremy Bynum was in the chat room yesterday, the representative from Ketchikan. He's the Republican from Ketchikan. And I had offered him to come on, and I'd given my email address, and he said in the chat room he's going to do it. Now, as of yesterday afternoon, which I think was the last time I looked at my email, I did not see a message back from Jeremy. He said he'd like to come on and discuss it. And I still don't have an email from Jeremy. So I'm interested to hear have a conversation about it. And here's what he had to say. But we'll start off with, because it's House District 1. Let's start off with Jeremy Bynum. Ahead of the vote, he said he would vote to override because if lawmakers failed to override the governor, the decision to raise the BSA means raising the maximum contribution that local governments can provide to their districts. Which, again, in light of what Brad was saying yesterday, maybe that's a better idea. He said if legislators didn't restore the funding, local governments would simply increase their local contributions, putting more of the cost of public schools on local taxpayers rather than sharing the cost across the state. Which isn't that the way it's supposed to be? Again, yesterday, for those of you on the radio that that Brad had a chart yesterday. And the chart broke down over the last, I think it was 5 different studies or 5 different metrics and reporting. And it covered about 3 years of the last 3 or 4 years. And basically, it's, it shows that in Alaska, our local contribution is about half of what it is as a national average, proportionally. So maybe maybe if there was more local contribution, there would be more local engagement, and maybe they'd get their poop in a group and do a better job of running the finances of the school districts. And I know that there's a whole equity thing and there's a federal hook in there. We talked about that. You can go back and listen to yesterday's show because we talked about that part of it. But maybe, everybody's screaming about how this needs to be local. This needs to be local control. This needs to be well, maybe there should be a higher local contribution to offset that. That would be my argument to Jeremy. His basic argument here is that if the state doesn't spend it, then it's going to fall on the locals. Well, yes, because that's who's benefiting is the local communities. And the locals should be paying for a big chunk of this. But the average in Alaska is like 20% of the contribution is coming, 21% is coming from the localities. And 50% is coming from the state. The national average is like 42 to 44% of contributions are coming from localities. Anyway, I want to talk to Jeremy Bynum about this when we get him on the program. Then you get Julie Colomb, who is such a super nice lady. I've talked to her a couple times, and I really enjoy talking to her, but I just vehemently disagree with some of her assertions because, again, it's that whole conservative smaller government thing, and it seems like she has a tendency or a propensity to push for, bigger government for certain things like childcare, education, and things. She said, quote, this is a quote, "I don't want one-time funding anymore. The problem is the way it's been put out that this is just some random $200 BSA veto. It wasn't. It was connected to 19 sections of policy in HB 57 that to me was significant." Now, the people who had asked and the people who were fighting for the governor's policies on this said that many of these policies paid lip service to what the governor was actually looking for, hence why he vetoed it. It wasn't really meaningful, but I digress. She said, "I didn't override SB 140 because I wasn't really a part of putting that together," which is the previous bill. She said it was like a half-page bill. It didn't have much policy in it, so I didn't get in the way with that one. But HB 57 has a lot of policy, and that's what I want. And that's what I've always told my constituents is what I need. A funding and a policy. I need both. I need it to be meaningful. And that, again, raises the question, how meaningful is it? Because, again, they missed some of the biggest components in there. And by the way, the governor had a brand new proposed bill built specifically for the special session it actually has an escalator built in. Remember we were talking about how the escalator is a big thing, and Shelley Hughes in her latest newsletter was touting that which is kind of, touting the fact that there's an automatic escalator built into this. Where is this? Here we go. This is the Shelley Hughes had her press release that came out after the special session. And she says it in here we go. She said, this is her quote. This is Shelley Hughes' quote after the veto override. She said, "Sometimes votes on the floors don't tell the whole story. A no vote today, like I made to uphold the governor's veto, was an actual yes vote for a package, reinstating the $50 million for the BSA and adding another $51 million in targeted funding to student outcome-based strategies and providing annual inflation proofing of 2%. So the governor's package has already had that 2% had an automatic escalator built in, which I don't think there should be an automatic escalator. I think we should have to fight for it. When it reaches that point to where, because then it forces us to have a conversation about it. Just putting the number in there, automatically escalating, it doesn't, because it just keeps, then it just grows. Then they don't care. Then they don't have to talk about it. Anyway, Colomb said this is where she's at on this thing. Then you get to Mike Kronk, and not surprising. The guy is he's a school guy, right? Was part of the education industrial complex for so long. It's kind of hard for him to say no at this point. He talks about the 9 different school districts that he represents. He says Fairbanks is the urban school district, and he did highlight a lot of the hard work that they've done. And Fairbanks has done a lot of cutting. I mean, they closed 5 schools. They did a bunch of work. Melissa's in there trying to crack the whip. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not happening. But I also don't know why he wouldn't push harder for some of the policy changes as well, because that's the thing. You could have gotten all the money back with some of the policy changes, because the governor said he was willing to do that, but nobody wanted to talk about it. Then you get to Bill Elam from Nikiski, and he declined significant comment. It's a paragraph, a short paragraph here to James Brooks. Elam declined significant comment, but said that he had given his word on voting for House Bill 57, the education funding bill, and wanted to stand by that word. Who did he give his word to? The constituents? The caucus? The union? Who did he give his word to? It doesn't say. I'm curious. He said stability is important to him, including stable funding for schools in his district that will allow districts to budget better in the future. I love it. You could just see it. Predictable, stable funding. That's going to be the buzzwords. Predictable, stable funding. They can't possibly budget unless they know down to the degree how much money they're going to have. They can't possibly budget based on, historical averages or best case, worst case scenario. They can't do that. They must have predictable, stable funding. And who did you promise, Bill? That's what I want to know. Who did you make the promise to? I'm just asking for a friend. I want to know. We're going to continue here in a minute. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. There are no automatic escalator. There was in the new bill, Harold. He's not keeping up. Harold's not keeping up. All right. I'm going backwards here. Good morning. Miguel says, hard to believe Mike voted that way when about 80% of his district is homeschooled. Crazy, right? Good morning. The real answer, says Chris, my libertarian brother, the real answer to why is always the same. There will always be just enough legislators to keep money flowing to the special interest. Trying to discuss the theater of why is just LARPing, live action role playing. They'll just be just enough. Yeah. Or maybe the school boards need to do their job. I'm 100% with this. Melissa says the same thing. It maybe the school board needs to do their job. Oh, we can't possibly do it without predictable and stable funding. You plan on the worst case scenario and all your surprises will be happy ones. You base it on a 5-year rolling average of what you received and reduce it by the number of students that you know are going to be gone, and you go from there. This is not rocket surgery. Melissa says, I see you laughing, Rick. I've done what I can with the board I have. Vote in October to get myself back in Audra Hall on, and we could do more. I've done well with what was in front of me. Yeah, exactly. Public school mafia can be shut down, but it takes people to understand that we are under a propaganda machine and not an education system. Yeah. Predictable, stable funding comes from a constitutional amendment, says Ben. Otherwise, spending decisions are subject to annual legislative appropriation. Well, and that's the thing, Ben. That's what I'm saying. This is why I am not in favor of putting an escalator, an automatic inflation proofing, whatever you want to call it, an automatic inflation adjustment into the BSA. Because what should happen is the money should remain the same until we start to see inflation eat into it, and then we start having another conversation. It should not be automatic. Because when it's automatic, we don't talk about it. It just happens. And we need to be able to have those conversations. It's crazy. Hayes says that Bill Elam probably promised Bryce Edgman. Maybe that was, I promised Bryce Edgman I would do it. Anyway. Yeah, and then you do some market research to manage the risk. This is Brian talking about my proposed budgeting situation. I mean, yeah, automatic escalators is a way to doom yourself, quite honestly. Because, and the reason why they say is, oh, we don't want to have to fight about it every year. Well, you should fight about it every year. It should be part of the discussions. It really should. I mean, that's the thing. Automatic escalators are just, they're a wink and a nod, and people forget about them. Every dollar should have to compete with every other dollar. That's what the appropriations process is about. And when you put it on set it and forget it and try, well, we'll just auto pen the hell out of this. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. That's where you have the problem. Cindy said, it's not just about the school board doing their job. It's getting people on the board who believe in accountability and smaller government. I agree with that too. Yeah, Brian says, that automatic escalator thing, that's not a bug. That's a feature. Yeah. No. I'm not down with this idea of this automatic escalation, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It just, and when she had that in her email and I was like, what did it actually say? And I went back and looked and I'm like, oh, okay. So the governor had put in an annual inflation proofing of 2% into his BSA proposal. Which, again, really shocks me that nobody jumped in on this because that gives them almost everything that they want. Oh, well, except for more BSA increase overall, which they've already got their plan laid out. They're coming back for next session, right? But, yeah, an automatic escalator it's a problem. Let's just put it that way. It's a major, major problem. All right. Let's get back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Yeah, we just got into this during the break here, this automatic escalator, this automatic inflation proofing of anything is problematic, to say the least. because it stops the discussion. And I know why they did it, because, well, we're sick and tired of fighting over this every year. We just want to give me the easy button. That's what I want, is the easy button. Can you give me oh yeah, look, we'll just build it in and then it'll just automatically go up and nobody will talk about it. That's the problem. Automatic equals without accountability. That's what it means. Automatic means without accountability. What you should do is you increase something and then you give it a few years, and as inflation eats into that buying power, you come back and have a new conversation and say, we need to increase this because inflation proofing it, or the inflation is eating into it. And then you have the conversation again, because it's an open opportunity, because this is an appropriation process. Anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sidebar. I didn't mean to get... Let's move on. James Kaufman, the Anchorage senator from District F. He said, in the end, for me, it was essentially the same money that was in the budget the last time. We had a $680 BSA in there. This was a little bit more, but unlike last year, there's actually some beneficial policy here. But again, if you look at what the policies were, they weren't what the governor was asking for, and they didn't do the things that... There was a lot of shiny kind of, policy facade on this thing. Anyway, he said, I think it's important for people to remember that much higher dollar figures that were floating around at the time. Yeah, but those didn't get passed. I mean, okay. He's talking about how we all came together in Kumbaya. Anyway, back when I voted for the bill, I said, well, if I vote for the bill, I'll go all the way with it. I have a hard time if I support something once with, excuse me, not supporting it unless there's new information or no reason not to do, or a new reason not to do so. So Kaufman's basically saying, I'm going along to get along. That's what it was about. Then we come down here to the peninsula. Justin Ruffridge. I have historically taken the position of my yays being yays and my nays being nays. I voted for HB 57 at both opportunities, and I think that it's the right thing to do from the perspective of the folks on the Kenai. He said, I heard from many, 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 that's his words, three manys. I heard from many, many, many of my constituents that said, stay on the right track. So, I think it's a difficult thing to do at the end of the day. You don't ever get into office with the intention of taking those types of votes. But I feel like it was about keeping a commitment, following the budget that we'd already passed. And I think we really had to move away from this idea of one-time funding, which I think is really irresponsible way of funding schools and getting back to stability. I think, and back to stability. There's that word again. Stability. I think I can help. Okay. So I'm not sure if Justin understood what this vote was about based on everything that he just said there. I mean, I'm just not sure, because it sounds like he thinks that the governor was overriding the entire thing and it wasn't just a one-time portional veto. He vetoed $200 out of $700 for this year alone. I feel about, he says, I don't ever think you don't get into office about with the intention of taking these kind of votes, but I feel like it was about keeping a commitment following the budget that we'd already passed. Well, but the governor has the power to override and veto portions of that budget. That's also part of the process. And he goes, and I think we really had to move away from the idea of one-time funding. This was not what? Justin, did you understand? This is forever. And this was a one-time veto of forever. What? He thinks that's a really irresponsible way of funding schools and get back to stability. So you just want to commit to endless funding for schools as long as they have predictability and stability. That's it. I mean, because they've already got stable, predictable funding in the current BSA. This $700 increase would again increase that predictability and stability. but they don't, hey, I'm all down for this as long as they say I don't want any of these people to ever propose any more one-time funding for school, because that's not predictable or sustainable. Dan Sadler, that guy's like a weather vane, man. He just blows in the wind. Whoever he talks to last, that's the side he's going on. It seems like he's a nice guy. I mean, super nice guy, but he just, I'm not even going to get into it. Doesn't even matter what he said. Will Stapp. This is the one that really surprised me, because Will was very strident for the entire session about who pays, how do we pay for it, how is this going to get done? And then this is what he had to say. I think education is important. I think Alaska's education system certainly needs to reform, but I could speak to my school district in Fairbanks and our school board president and our board in general, what they've done, the vast majority of things that they've been asked to do. They've been asked to reduce the admin. Well, they cut the admin by 50%. They've been asked to consolidate. They consolidated several schools. They looked to outsourcing. They let go of custodians, and now they outsource that. Fundamentally, I believe that there's a balance between funding and reform, and when you ask people to do things, especially when they're hard things, and hard things are often unpopular, and you should support people when they do hard things, that you ask them to do what is necessary. I just feel like it would not be supporting my values if I didn't vote the way I did or articulate the way I did. Yes, it's a particularly tough vote, and I'll explain why. This kind of sounds a little weird, but I'm a lifelong Republican. I've been active in Republican politics my entire time in Alaska. I've supported campaigns, local, statewide, legislative, for the better part of 15 years, and the last thing I really want to do is contradict my own governor. I believe it's the right thing, and time will tell, but I will say on a personal level, the last thing I ever thought I would do would be to override the governor. It's just a weird moment. Okay. And then Rob Yunt. I mean, Will, you were so strong right up until that last moment. Then Rob Yunt. He said, so the point I would like to make is I've changed the paradigm. There will be no more one-time money. You will not see Republicans vote for that. I've killed that. I didn't run my business that way. North Rim Bank would have put me out of business if I behaved that. Again, is Rob and are they missing the whole point on this? This was not one time. This was a one-time veto of reoccurring money. You guys passed it, $700 in perpetuity. That's what's happening right there. Did you miss it? There's no more one-time money. Well, by God, I'm going to hold you to that. There should be no more one-time funding for schools. If you want to do it, it's got to come from the BSA. How about that? It's just, there's a lot of ridiculous posturing in some of this stuff. And I want to have each and every one of these people on to dissect these comments, because it makes no sense whatsoever. All right, we're up against the break. We got more coming up. Kevin McCabe, Hour 2, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense, Liberty Base, Free Thicket Radio. Come on back. We'll see you in a minute. Okay. I don't know. Yeah, no, I thought there was some serious hubris in Yunt's comment too. Just kind of the way, it was kind of garbled up, and then yeah. The point that I would like to make is that I've changed the paradigm. You did? All by yourself? I've killed that. I don't run a business that way. Okay, well, but I don't think there will be no more one-time money. I mean, that this was not about one-time money. I mean, that's my problem here, is that this was not about one-time money. Both he and Ruffridge are referencing that you did it. Congrats, you moved away from one-time money. You increased the BSA. That's not what this vote was about. Now, are they just assuming that people are stupid enough to not understand that? Or did they not understand it themselves? I mean, wow. Wow. That's the questions. Ben asks, did the legislature actually assess fiscal need or just trust the system? Oh, come on, Ben. You've got to trust the system. You've got to trust the way, because that's the way we've always done it. And that's the way we have to trust the system, Ben. You know, that's how it is. Oh, man. All right. Music overriding Dukes. Maybe reload. Okay. Gotta check something real quick. Make sure that I'm all okay. And that is correct. Okay. All right. Yeah, Gail Kuhn says the whole statement was I. Yeah, it was kind of weird. It was kind of weird. The whole thing. Couldn't give the governor a policy win, says it all. Yeah, that's kind of weird that way, isn't it? Look at the makeup of the legislative task force. It's an absolute joke. Well, I mean, it's like all union officials, right? It's all NEA stooges in there. So yeah, of course it's going to be a joke. That's yeah. Anyway, you should call some of these people unannounced. Would be interesting to see. Yeah, but I mean, what am I going to do? Call them at 6 o'clock in the morning and see they're going to see my name and go, "Oh, well, I'm not answering that." You know. Are you aware of the Battlestar Galactica mantra? What, so say we all? Is that what we're talking about here? I'm looking back to see. I hate it when I can't see, because usually, you know, the replies are nested. And so sometimes I don't see that. So when you guys reply to something else, I'm like, what were they talking about? Because that's an interesting comment. All right. Let's is that your puppy I hear snoring? Yes, he's snoring under my feet, you know. Yeah, Ben says, I'm happy to hear that with escalators built in, there won't be a fight over education spending increases in the future. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, Harold, some of the legislators are NEA stooges. I mean, they're basically unpaid lobbyists for the NEA. So yeah, 100%, Harold. Absolutely 100%. All right, let's get things ready over here for Kevin. We'll check our stuff here to see where we're at. Hello, are you there, my friend? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I hear you just fine.
Okay, good. All right. Look at you. You all ready to dive into this thing with both feet and you know, give the man the finger? I mean, wait, you are the man. You're a legislator. You are the man. Don't do that. You know what, quickly here before we jump into the we're still in the break here, just you, me, and 70 of our closest friends on the internet. I mean, what do you think? I mean, were you kind of as baffled as I was by some of this commentary where they were acting like the veto was against the continuous one? I mean, they keep talking about this one-time funding when that's not what it was. Was it as confusing for you as it was for me?
Yeah, well, that's why I wrote the article, is because, you know, James Brooks got quotes from all of them, but he didn't bother to call any of us and say, well, why didn't you override it? All these people overrode the governor. Why didn't you do it? What were the reasons? You know, a fair and balanced reporter probably should have or would have done that, but James didn't. He was more interested in highlighting those Republicans that felt the need to override a Republican governor, and that was kind of frustrating to me. So that's the major reason I wrote the article.
Well, and I want to talk about it. So we're going to get into it. We'll start this conversation fresh in here in just a minute. Hold on, Kevin. I'll put you back in the chat room, in the green room. Not the chat room, the green room. All right, here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense Radio. Back with more.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find links to the audio-only live stream, as well as the podcast and links to social media like Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble, where we simulcast the radio show via video every day here on the program. Thanks for coming in and joining us. And, of course, live around the world, or live around the state of Alaska on this plain old terrestrial radio, this your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends, and good morning. Welcome to Hump Day, hour 2 of the big radio show. Big announcement before we jump into it with our guest. I will be off the air on Friday. The show will be off the air on Friday. We'll be returning on Monday. There'll be alternate programming wherever you're listening, because I'm taking a 3-day weekend for personal reasons. I'm getting older, so I need to do that. I have to go change my oil this weekend or whatever it is. And so we're going to do that, but we'll be off the air on Friday, and we'll be back on Monday, ready to go, ready to rock and roll. Just finished up talking about all the legislators that voted to override the governor's veto, all the minority members, and their reasonings, some of which made no sense. Their statement, their printed, quoted statements were confusing and weird, and like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm going to try and get all these legislators on the program to talk about those things. This is like one of my new favorite articles with these quotes. We're going to talk about it because some of it's just bizarre, right? Kevin McCabe's reaction to this was he didn't get quoted in the paper because James Brooks didn't ask any of the Republicans who voted to uphold the veto why they did it. So his response to that was to write an article in Must Read Alaska, which says Alaska's education crisis demands reform, not just more money. Kevin McCabe joins us this morning to discuss it here in hour 2. Representative from out there in Big Lake, and we welcome him to the program this morning. Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
You know, it's another beautiful day in paradise. Just another beautiful day. You know, it's the days are getting shorter. I'm getting a little worried. You know, I want to get as much summer in as I can. That's why I'm taking this extra day on Friday. So I just want to get one more extra beautiful day in before we do it. So Kevin, I don't know how much you were listening to the last hour of the program, but, you know, I read some of these comments, and it just seems like some of the legislators are really confused. Justin Ruffridge was saying, basically talking about how we need to stop the one-time funding. We did. That was the whole point of the $700 BSA increase. It's in perpetuity. Right? The governor's veto was just $200 this year. There's still $500 in increase going in, and it still goes in perpetuity. So I'm a little confused about some of these comments. What is your thought?
Yeah, I sort of have the same thing. We missed it all, or we didn't maybe didn't focus on it. Certainly, the NEA and the alphabet soup that represents the school boards and the school administrators didn't say anything about it. But the fact is that BSA increase is going to be in there forever now. The $700, and the governor just vetoed. He vetoed 200 of it this year because he's trying to be the adult in the room and balance the budget and give us a budget that gives the state stable funding. Frankly, we're talking about stable funding. You did in last hour, or some of those quotes talked about stable funding for the school districts. Well, what about the state? What about the state that has no input whatsoever in the contracts, the collective bargaining agreements that the school districts negotiate? We have no seat at the table, no input whatsoever. And so the school districts could negotiate a 20% pay raise for all the teachers and all the administrators and everybody else, and we'd be expected to step up and pay for it. So the governor's just saying, or he said, my idea of what he said was, hey, look, we have to balance the budget. The budget in the state must come first, or frankly, everything goes out the window. So I'm vetoing this $200 to be the adult in the room and balance the budget this year only.
And it was also about his policy decisions too, right? Because they keep going.
Oh.
Some people are hiding behind the cover of, there was policy in this. It was all lip service policy. It wasn't what the governor had requested or what the majority of the minority was asking for as far as policy. It's lip service to real policy.
Right, and that's what HB 57. That's one of the reasons that I was. That's one of the reasons I voted against HB 57 in the first place was all the policy that we had tried to put into there, and at one point was in there, was weakened by the words target and may, and and there were other things that were upsetting to me. The fact that the minorities didn't have any input on who was put on the task force. Totally selected by leadership. So all of those things for me collectively on HB 57 were why I voted against it. I thought it was a really weak bill. And so anyways, yeah, you're exactly right. The reason I wrote this article is because James Brooks didn't give anybody in the minority a chance that didn't vote to override. He didn't give us a chance to speak or to explain our reasoning. So not a fair and balanced article. Was less. My piece was less about counteracting what my colleagues, why they voted the way they did, and more about saying, hey, here's some reasoning about why we did not vote to override the governor, and that's kind of why I felt I had to write it. So.
Well, because again, the thing that I think is getting lost in the shuffle on all of this discussion about the school funding and everything else is the students, right? I mean, that's really what's getting lost in this discussion. We had officials, and I think Willie was quoting it for us earlier. Willie Keppel, I think, quoted us. One of the superintendents was out there, and he said, "My job is to protect as many jobs as I can." Essentially, I'm paraphrasing it here, but that's essentially what he was saying. That this was about keeping the jobs in the school. Again, where is the outcomes? Why are the students not the front and center of this discussion? The discussion seems to circle around, we need to protect the industry as a whole, keeping everybody employed, nobody loses their jobs, but nobody's talking about 51st out of 53. 51st out of 53 as far as educational aptitude and achievement. Nobody is talking about that.
I know 100%, and that was frustrating to see Superintendent Bryant say that, my focus is on keeping jobs. He didn't even say teacher jobs. He just said jobs. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Aren't you the school district administrator? Shouldn't your focus be on teaching our kids to get them out of the basement? I mean, 51st out of 53 states and territories, which is why there's more than 50. It includes all the territories. So we're doing horrible. So let's get our focus back to the kids. And the most frustrating thing to me is if you look at the collective school, administrative, teaching, principal, school board, administration focus on kids between the governor and Dina Bishop and Todd Smolden and others that are in the Department of Education. If you look at the collective experience in teaching kids in the executive branch compared to those that are overriding the veto or that are didn't want HB 57, the governor has head and shoulders on his side more school and educational experience and school administrative experience on than we do. So we're just going to override him just because we're mad at him or because we don't want to give the governor a win. To me, overriding that veto and overriding the veto on HB 57 destroyed any leverage that conservative Republicans who care about our kids, it destroyed any leverage that we have, including the governor's leverage. That's probably a controversial statement. I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble with my colleagues, but that's my opinion. We had some leverage. We had an ability to fix schools and fix the education system for our kids. And because the governor is not well thought of in certain segments of the legislature, they just overrided it just because it's the governor.
Tall man bad. Tall man
bad. Yep. 100%. Right? Dunleavy derangement syndrome.
Yeah. We're talking with Kevin McCabe, who is the representative from District 8 in Big Lake. We're talking about his article in Must Read Alaska, which, again, the headline, I think, says pretty much everything. Alaska's education crisis demands reform, not just more money. Now, we heard them change tax during the last session, Kevin, because we kept going back to 51st out of 53, bottom of the pack. Scholastic aptitude is not increasing. We're losing ground. We went from 47th to 51st. I mean, we're sliding backwards. It's getting worse. And then the mantra became, we're not failing, we're starving. It's because they're blaming the money, the lack of money, we're not failing, we're starving. Ergo, that's why we're failing. Even though we spend $20,000 to $28,000 per student, depending on which numbers you look at, $28,000 per student. And I mean, that's more than anybody else in the nation. What makes us so different that this causes us to be starving?
Oh, well, there's 100 excuses that they'll give you. Look, Alaska is very wide spread geographically. Many of our schools, our village schools, are not on the road system. There's 100 different reasons, but shouldn't we cut where we can? Shouldn't we consolidate where we can? So Prince of Wales Island, perfect example. 4 school districts on one island. Come on, really? So maybe we need to find the places where we can consolidate and do what we can to make it more efficient, make education more efficient. I'll tell you, in certain aspects, Kronk is not wrong. The chronic absenteeism in the rural schools is through the roof. It's through the roof because the state owns, I think, 57 of those schools. Emily Schwing had a really good article about that. The state owns 57 of those schools, and they're in a huge state of disrepair. But as long as we keep throwing money at the BSA to support the Anchorage School District's idea of maintaining their job force, we're not going to have the money to support these rural school districts. I think she said there's $9 billion of repairs needed on the REAA schools. One of the reasons that parents don't send their kids to those schools or don't force their kids to go to school is because the schools are in such a state of disrepair with falling in roofs and mold and that sort of thing. So how can we how can we focus where the money actually needs to go when the big elephant in the room, the NEAA and the Alaska Council of School Administrators, and are just raising this huge clamor and sending out all these, whether it be the red buttons or the red shirts or the notices to parents that you must demand more BSA. Well, maybe that's not the way to solve it. Maybe we need to focus more on major school maintenance. How about on transportation, and relieve the school districts of those sort of things so that the school districts can get back to their actual job, which is educating our kids instead of, screaming about their budgets and retaining jobs. So,
Well, how about putting a provision in, which was pitched out, and it was pitched out. There used to be a provision that 70% of the dollars in a BSA had to get into the classroom, and not just some kind of amorphous, oh, there is some IT in a classroom, so we'll funnel all the IT costs under classroom costs and everything. But I mean, truly into the classroom. What about a bill or a new statute that mandates that 70% of the BSA has to go directly into the classroom?
yeah, it used to be in there. Yeah, we took that out, or that was taken out several years ago. And it is sort of frustrating when you talk to like the head of the Alaska Council of School Administrators. She will tell you, well, the 75% of the money goes into the classroom, regardless of the fact that it's no longer in statute. But when you look at the coding, as you said, the whole IT department is included in that 75%. It's clearly, it says, and maybe that's outdated. So, and also principals, vice principals, vice principals, and assistants to vice principals, they're all in there as well. So all the administrators are under classroom. Is that the right place for them? I don't know, but we certainly need to have that discussion again. In fact, there are members of our legislature right now that were part of that task force that helped take that clause out of there, and I think it was a huge mistake.
Yeah, well, because again, if you look at it in how they used to calculate it and how they figure it, and Sarah Maltabano has done this, and I think actually Sarah Vance had some of the numbers as well. It's somewhere between 41 and 49% is actually making it into the classroom, depending on the district and where they're at. 41%, which means that the other 60% is being consumed by overhead and administrative costs and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, again, is it a jobs program or is it an education system? And I would argue along this time is that we're basically creating a jobs program, and this is the education industrial complex that you and I have discussed at great length. We're going to continue this discussion. We're going to get into the article. Kevin McCabe is our guest. We will be back with more. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with more in just a moment. Back with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Kevin McCabe is our guest here on the program. 40 of the districts treat the education entitlement as a jobs program, says Harold. I mean, we're in agreement. It's amazing the things that Harold and I agree on. But yeah, consolidation, like you said, 4 districts on one island. I mean, why do we have 54 separate districts in this state with 135,000 students? That makes no sense. I'm not saying you have one district, but I mean, you could at least break it down geographically. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I looked into that a little bit. In fact, I had an amendment at one point. I can't even remember which bill it was. It might have been to HB 57, actually, that would have reduced the school districts down to 30. and require Deed to do it. I think Deed can do it by themselves. They don't need legislative approval to reduce the districts. That's what my research indicated is that. But the problem is parents don't want it. They don't want school districts. They want local control. And I see Ben's comment in the chat room there where, really, you want local control, but you want the state to do it all. What I'm a little unclear the message that we're getting from parents sometimes, and maybe it's because it's filtered through the NEA. I don't know, but it is sort of frustrating. You try to give them local control, even increasing the local contribution would seem to give you more local control. I mean, if you're paying, your property taxes are going more to your school, you're going to attend school board meetings, you're going to force the school district administrator or superintendent to not focus on admin jobs, but to focus on teacher jobs and focus on the classrooms. And you know what? Nobody talks about it. They don't want to hear it. They all need to come out to the Matsu and spend a few days with Dr. Trainee and the way the Matsu is doing it, because they are focused on kids. They're focused on putting kids in classrooms, making classrooms interesting enough with the CTE and with the teachers that kids want to attend. So the chronic absentee in the Matsu is decreasing. And we, with our CTE programs and stuff, but nobody wants to talk about it. You mentioned the Matsu to some of the folks that come into into my office, and they can't get away from that discussion fast enough.
And that's part of the problem when you show them success stories. You show them success stories, and they're like, "Oh, well, that's great for you, but let me talk about my shiny object over here." And that's part of the problem. They don't want to hear. This is the same reason why they don't want to talk about charter schools, the success reason of charter schools, because again, it flies in the face of what they want. It's like they're trying to bake in that inefficiency and just get as much money as they can. And the kids are not even an afterthought at this point. It's just they're not even. I mean, I haven't heard any of the conversation has all centered around the funding. On the pro side, on the pro HB 57 side, there was not a single person that responded in that article to James Brooks that talked about outcomes for the students. Not a single
100%, 100%. In the whole charter school discussion, that's why the governor wants to, he picked that piece of the shining star, if you will, of our education system, and said, look, our charter schools are doing fabulous. So let's do more. Let's do more of fabulous for our kids. Let's bring charter schools more authorizers, more ability for the parents to initiate charter schools without being shut down by their competition, which is the local school board and the local school districts, and allow them, like the one in Homer, Nikolaev's, I can't say that very well, but
Nikolaev's,
that's those parents are focused on their kids. It's local control. Let's do a charter school for them instead of, if that's what they want, why are we being resistant to that? I just don't get it.
That's what they're trying to do. That's what they're trying to do. All right. We're 15 seconds out. Kevin McCabe is our guest. Is the answer more money or is it reform? We're going to get into the article here in just a moment. Please like and share, like and follow, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's get to it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
District 30, by the way.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right, welcome back to the program. We're continuing now with Kevin McCabe, representative in the Alaska State House for District 30 out there in Big Lake, and the whole area is out there. We are ready to go, and we're diving into this article that he wrote for Must Read Alaska. He said the reason he wrote the article was because the piece from James Brooks in the Alaska Beacon, which was reprinted in the ADN and other places, interviewed all these people who voted to override the governor's veto that were in the minority, but didn't talk to anybody who voted to uphold it. And so this is your rebuttal to that. Now, it's going to start off here to begin with. Again, we've already covered some of this, the idea that somehow we're starving the districts, but we're spending more than almost any other state in the nation, Kevin, on education. And we have some of the lowest results in the country, including territories, DC, and all the territories out there. And this really is not about the money. It's about the process. It's about the policy. It's about that. Walk me through the beginning of this article here.
Sure. Well, you know that I've read Weapons of Mass Instruction by Gatto. In fact, I've read it twice, and I have it on tape that I'm listening to in my truck right now, and his new book I'm reading as well. So I believe that we need to focus less on the Prussian model of parking kids' butts in school, in sitting them nicely in their chairs, and they have a recess and they react to the bell, and all that sort of stuff. Maybe we need to update the way we teach our kids and focus on those things that work for our kids today. We don't need factory workers anymore. We don't need that Prussian model of schooling. But the NEA, the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and all that, they were interested in schools that made factory workers for them. All that's gone. So maybe we need to update our idea of the way we do schooling to fit what our children need today, with
Right.
all the electronics, with all the tablets and all the handheld devices and everything that kids are using right now. They go to school and they park them in the desk, and we took away their cell phones, or we tried to with that HB 57. That language was horrible, but maybe we need to update the way we teach our kids. And I think that's the way the Matsu is starting to look and to drift, is they're focused on teaching our kids where the kids are at today, instead of in this old, outdated model of schooling that's been around since the late 1800s, I think.
Well, and I think because if you don't adapt, you'll die, right? I mean, adapt or die. That's an old axiom. For sure. And the school system has not adapted. As you said, we're using the same model that we've been using for 135 years. And I think that can be pointed to as one of the reasons why you're seeing people leave brick and mortar school systems. And you talk about that. We have a declining enrollment. We know it. We've had a declining enrollment for years. And yet as the enrollment continues to decline, which should reduce the funding because it's based on a per student model, instead the legislature increases it. They've got a hold harmless provision that says if you lose students, you'll still get the funding as if they're there for at least, for 3 years. It ratchets down every year for 3 years. I mean,
Right.
That's ridiculous. If you got X number of students, you should get X number of money, and that should force them to adapt. Unfortunately, it's protectionism. We're trying to protect the system that we have, no matter what, whether it's working or not. And parents, they're not having anything. I mean, they're leaving the system for a reason.
Right. The smart parents are getting completely out of it. They're just going to a private school and they're spending the money. It's an increasing percentage. I think in Anchorage, it's still less than 5% or 6%. It's right around there of parents who have said, I am done with this. I'm going to put my children in the Christian school or whatever private school they decide to, and shoulder the whole burden myself. And I think the one parent I talked to said it's about $15,000 a kid to private school my kids. And I'm willing to do it because these are my kids. This is the next generation of Alaskans. And with our school system right now in Alaska, with our school districts and with our poor outcomes, we are creating a generational problem for Alaskans. And, I'll be gone by the time these kids grow up and start taking over. But My children won't. What's going to happen to my sons that are going to be dependent on a worker that can make change for a $10 bill or those sorts of things, or even workers that are going to develop our resources? How are we going to increase the economic ability of Alaska to compete in the world if our children that we're educating are so far in the basement? And we're just not hacking the program, if you ask me.
Right. No, I mean, and again, I would agree that the focus of this entire discussion should be on the outcomes of the children. Now, we can have the argument of we're starving, we're not failing, and in that context, but the problem is that's not even part of the conversation. The kid's educational outcome is not even part of the equation. We've seen the homeschooling and the alternative schooling, correspondence, allotment schooling. We've seen that explode in the state of Alaska. And again, that's all because the parents are frustrated. I mean, COVID was eye-opening for parents. They saw the kind of education their kid was getting because they were sitting over their shoulders looking at the iPad during the lessons, and they were going, well, I could do that. That's not hard. And we saw it, we saw it happen. We saw those changes occur. Now we're going to hear, and we're already hearing about the drums of war are already beating for the next session. We can already see it. It's going to have to be bigger. It's going to have to be bigger, and it's going to have an automatic escalate. It's going to have inflation proofing built into it so that we don't have to fight over it every year. Again, stable and predictable. Those are the two words we're going to hear a million times over the next 18 months to 24 months. But we're already providing a huge amount of money. And then they'll claim, of course, that it's not constitutional. You've rebuffed that a little bit. You've rebuffed that conversation about the whole constitutional component, because funding alone does not make something constitutional, right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting conversation, actually. It's the Moore versus the state of Alaska decision by Judge Sharon Gleason before she was a federal judge. And it's a very, she has a very interesting conclusion or very interesting ruling or opinion at the very end, and somewhat buried in the decision itself. And she basically says that, and in fact, this suit was brought because the whoever was representing Moore, whoever was behind it, said the legislature is not providing enough funding. And Judge Gleason said, that's not true. The legislature is providing funding. They actually lost that lawsuit on the basis of funding. What she did say is it's not just funding alone that the legislature must provide, but there's four different things that they must provide. And one of those is, frankly, it's outcomes. So if I was a parent and my kid got to UAA and had to take remedial anything, I would be suing the state of Alaska. I would be suing the legislature and say, you didn't comply with this judge's decision, which said that the school districts must be accountable to the legislature and to the state for the outcomes of our children. And I suspect that that's probably coming probably pretty soon. And somebody is going to say, yep, they've been throwing money at it, but they haven't been teaching our kids. And so how, as a legislature, how are we supposed to fix accountability when the governor has put in several bills? There have been several bills from Republicans that attempt to fix the accountability, attempt to focus on the kids, and attempt to, whether it be the Reads Act, which took, 10 years or 8 years to get put in place.
Right.
We've tried to do a bunch of that, and there's always been resistance and pushback from the NEA. Why is that? Why are the people that should be focusing on our education? Isn't that NEA the National Education Association, or is it the National Educators Association? Why are they pushing back against the legislature that wants to try to fix the outcomes for our kids? They should be embracing that. And maybe it's just because some of them that are running education committees in the legislature have zero education experience and no kids.
Well, and that's, again, part of the problem here. When you look back at this Moore decision, If they're failing the test on the educational output, and we can adequately show that there is funding there, and that there's assessments, but the oversight is not there. And again, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If we're taking the same system that we've had without changes and just pouring exponentially ever increasing amounts of money into it, and we're getting the same or poorer results, we know that that's not working. There's got to be another option. I hope there is a court case on this. I hope somebody does bring a court case to this to say it's not about the funding, but it's a suit against the state because they're failing to actually educate the kids. Mississippi, one of the economically poorest states in the country, spends a fraction on their students of what they did, but they changed their policies, and those policy decisions have caused them to catapult from the bottom of the category into the upper middle part, and they're still going every year, getting better and better every year. Why aren't we looking at that? Again, this is that whole Matsu thing where you start talking about the Matsu, their eyes glaze over and they run away. That's exactly what's happened. You point out an example of that, or the Reads by 9 program, which had been in Florida for 10 years. Why did it take 8 or 9 years for that to get passed here in the state of Alaska? Because it changes the policy and the way they do business, and they don't like that.
Yeah, 100%. And Mississippi is a really good example of what you can do when you focus on policy and when you focus on our kids. You know, one of the things that has been an eye-opener for me, the entity that should be weighing in on this and should be helping the legislature has been largely silent, and that's UAA. So UAA, if you dig deep enough, and our university system is the Cadillac of universities, and we spend a lot of money on them. But if you dig into it deep enough, they will tell you that many of the kids that graduate from Alaska high schools need remedial reading and remedial math and remedial English classes to be able to compete on the university level. Why doesn't UAA weigh in on this and get on the side of the kids? Well, universities are big business. They make money off of those remedial classes, right? So, it just the whole business versus kids discussion. It's something that we need to bring into the open, and we need to honestly discuss what's happening to our kids, because we're creating a generation of kids that are going to have problems competing in the world.
Kevin McCabe is our guest. We're going to continue with him here in just a moment. We'll return. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Kevin McCabe is our guest here on the program, and we're going to continue here. Let me see if there's any kind of cogent concepts. This is a great comment. This is from Jeannie down on the peninsula, and she says, interesting concept. The legislature can't control themselves. How will they control the school boards? The state school board is a mess. They still support DEI. I mean, she has a valid point, Kevin. I mean, you're right. If the legislature is going to try and take control, they can't even control themselves. How are we supposed to make this work?
Yeah, 100%. And especially, how are we supposed to make this work if we put language in place in a bill that allows a majority to select people on a task force? Say, we had the minority in the House had no input on who the speaker selected for the task force. So it's a bit frustrating, whether we agreed with the selection or not. It's a bit frustrating to just have to sit there on the sidelines, and that bill, HB 57, allowed that, to sit there on the sidelines and see our voice essentially silenced, when what we should have done is a minority has got together in the caucus and had a discussion on who we wanted to represent us. It may have been the same people or the same person, but it may not have been. So, that's a bit frustrating, and it's a bit frustrating to have that kind of split, which is, or that bill that created that kind of split in our caucus, which is part of another discussion, I guess.
And remind us again who ended up on the task force, this education task force, which is supposed to meet later this month. Who are the players in this group?
Yeah, so the players, I believe, and I could get this wrong because it's not right at the top of my head, but certainly from the minority, it's Representative Ruffridge, and I think Senator Tobin, Senator Bjorkman, I believe, and I'm not sure who from the majority in the House. So, it is what it is, I guess, at this point. But
yeah, it's an NEA task force, says Donna. Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, because again, these are people who are all again coded, and like I said, these are basically quasi lobbyists at this point for protecting the education system as a whole. We need to, going back to the whole adapt or die thing. We need to adapt our education system. Things are changing, like you said, and as you pointed out, as Gatto pointed out in his book. God, I interviewed him like 15 years ago. I mean, the guy is brilliant when he talks about these things. But the whole Prussian school model, which we're still based on today, was basically created to make factory workers. It was part of the Industrial Revolution. That's what they wanted. They wanted, good little employees who would go in and do those things and ring the bell and clock in, clock out, do the assembly line stuff. But obviously things have changed. We need an adaptive system that can change with the changing times. I mean, nobody's going around thinking they're going to work at one company for 30 years and retire. That's not a thing that really happens anymore. The average millennial changes careers like 12 times in their working career. I mean, it's a whole different, and with technologies and AI and all this other stuff, we've got to adapt our systems. And it just seems like we are unwilling to even address that.
Right. And that's one of the reasons there's a clause in HB 57 that says that we're supposed to track, or the school deed is supposed to track students for 20 years after they get out of high school. And a lot of conservatives were very concerned about that. And I understand that, they don't want the chip implanted in their hand, and they don't, they want to be free, and they don't want to have to report back to the school district. But frankly, colleges do that now anyways. They track their graduates. Hey, what are you doing these days? They send out a survey. They, how many times have you changed jobs? What career field are you still working in the Old English literature career field, or are you at a coffee shop? They want to know what the graduates are doing and what the demographic that graduated at that time is doing. And I was hopeful that this clause that's in there in 20 years will help us be more nimble and be more able to see what our kids are doing and to see what jobs they're working in, to better prepare the next generation for the new jobs. But it's like turning a battleship. It just takes forever.
Right.
Some
Right.
of the reason is because of the hold harmless agreement. There are some
Right.
school districts that are trying. Melissa's trying. They've had to close schools. They've had to consolidate. They've had to be more nimble. And those are the kinds of things that we need to do more of. And we just have to get the discussion back to our kids. How are we going to help our kids?
That's the focus. It should be on the kids. Jeremy Bynum was kind enough to provide us Loki Tobin, who's an NEA proselyte, Rebecca Himshoot, former teacher, Jesse Keel, NEA proselyte, Mike Kronk, former teacher, Andy Story, former teacher, Justin Ruffridge. This is the makeup of the education committee. So that ought to be super interesting to see how that runs out. All right, we're about to jump back in. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay, one final segment for today. Kevin McCabe is our guest. We're talking about his article in Must Read Alaska, and we're getting down to the interesting part here, where we talk about what I've been saying the last few weeks, which is we're going to keep hearing these words. We're going to keep hearing words like stability, stable and predictable funding, predictability. That's what's the new mantra, and we saw that in the article that was in the Newsminer here recently. They had a editorial board piece that was talking about that, how we need that stable and predictable funding. Well, first of all, nobody outside, not even the government in the state of Alaska, has stable and predictable funding. No business has stable. I mean, they have projections, they have historicals, but they don't know that for sure next year we're going to have at least this. You just don't know. You budget based on the kind of worst case scenario, best and worst case, or you can find it in the middle, but nothing is predictable or stable. And you point that out here.
Right. Michael, in the last 2 decades, the legislature has never failed to step up to the plate when the school district said we absolutely must have more money. Last year in the 32nd legislature, we put $322 million into the school education system, including a one-time 780 BSA increase, $65 million on the top 15 things in major school maintenance. This year, I think we funded 3 in major school maintenance, maybe 5. But the point being is we have never failed our education system. The legislature hasn't. The stable funding came from the 5960 or what the BSA was about 5,900. Now it's 6660. That's the stable funding. That's what you plan your budgets on. And if you need more, let's talk about why you need more. That's the accountability piece. Why do you need more? Is it because you screwed up and negotiated a CBA that was more than you can afford? Or is it because you have a building that's falling down or transportation costs are through the roof? Why do you need more? That's the accountability they need to bring back to the legislature. And that's why, in my opinion, over the last 2 decades, the legislature has done what they would call unstable funding, but outside the BSA increases or funding that is not a BSA increase. We can do stable funding all they want. At some point, the state is going to run out of money. Our finance committee members will tell you we are in dire straits, and yet we just provided a $700 BSA increase, and now they want more. And then there's the whole defined benefits discussion on the table that's coming up. So where does it end?
Right.
With oil, I think oil right now, I checked it yesterday, was 66.
Okay. Well, there's some bad news coming. Next week is going to be interesting. There's some bad news coming. The latest from the EIA is the outlook of what's going on in oil, and they're predicting right now that according to the EIA that they're going to increase the global production by up to 2 million barrels per day. They were proposing to do that by the end of 2026. Now they've upped that. They're going to do it at the end of 2025. And the new projections for Brent is that it's going to be in the mid to high 40s. Right. Mid to high 40s by the spring, which means since ANS crude is a premium over Brent, we're going to see $50 oil. Right. Now we're at 66. Imagine what happens when it gets down into the 50s, the low 50s. What happens then?
We need to play this out a little bit, and we need to think further. And this, whoever, the school districts and everybody else needs to, in the finance committees, we can fund the schools. We could give them the $1,800 BSA increase plus inflation proofing that they wanted. But if we can't plow the roads, how are the kids going to get to those wonderful brick and mortar neighborhood schools? Are we going to now put a hot potato in their pocket and make them walk all the way to school? We have to be realistic with our funding and strike a balance.
And you brought up the final topic, the final thought, because you just brought it up, this inflation proofing, which I was surprised to see that the governor had offered inflation proofing in his bill, which they never moved out of the committee for the special session, but he included a inflation proofing component on that, and that is supremely dangerous. If you start adding inflation proofing to this, it takes it all out of the public view. It just automatically escalates. There's no discussion on it. There's no nothing. I mean, what should happen is what's happening right now. You fund to a certain amount, and that goes on until we start to see inflation jump, bite into it. And then you come back and have the discussion again. You don't put an automatic escalator in that just automatically increases it with no input from anybody. That is dangerous. Am I wrong?
No, I 100% agree, but I think it demonstrates, to me anyways, how serious and how worried the governor is about our children's outcomes. So for him to put something like that in there, knowing how concerned he is about our budgets, means that he is even more concerned about our children and the outcomes and the long-term problems that we're going to have with our budgets if we don't have an educated group of children growing up to be educated adults in the state of Alaska that can manage our resources and can manage our legislature. So the governor's looking very long-term, saying, okay, if you are serious about inflation proofing, serious about money, then I'm offering this right now because I'm serious about education. So let's have a conversation, meet somewhere in the middle. And unfortunately, the tall man bad syndrome completely took over, in my opinion, and we just vetoed. We didn't even really discuss those. We just put them on the floor, and that was it. And that was really frustrating to me. We're actually still in session. We could go down and meet on those bills anytime, but they're not going to.
Yeah, absolutely. We're down to less than 2 minutes here. So final thoughts, this upcoming session. Again, we're already seeing the battle lines being drawn. We're hearing about stable and predictable funding versus students, right? We're hearing about funding versus students. We're hearing about educational. And as you said, the defined benefits package is going to be out there. All this is going to be out there. Now, this is all going to be crushed down by the weight of oil prices plummeting. That's going to be happening in the first part of the year. But at the same time, that's what they're going to be pushing for. Give me a prediction for this upcoming session here in the next 90 seconds.
Yeah, I just hope that somebody stands up and says, raises their hand and says, wait a minute, oil's going to be $50 a barrel. And we're talking about spending how much? maybe $9 billion in the next 10 years on defined benefits. And you want how much of a BSA? And you notice we have spent this whole hour talking about things, Michael, and not once have we mentioned the PFD, right? So, it's a little frustrating to me that those parents that want to take their kids out of public school and get them completely away from our failing education system could use that PFD to take those, put those kids in a private school. And we're taking that ability away as well.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the PFD because, again, it's dead. It's gone. This might be the last year we get it. With the crisis next year, I'd be surprised if we get any PFD next year. Kevin McCabe, thank you so much, folks. We're out of time. We'll see you tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show. Be kind, love one another, live well. All right, before I give Kevin the last word here, I want to comment. Jeremy just said, under Alaska statute, the Department of Ed is granted broad authority to exercise general supervision over the state's public schools. That includes setting minimum course standards, accrediting schools, overseeing early education, correspondence schools, approving. It's a long comment here. Jeremy, I didn't see your email. I would love for you to send me an email and get you on the program next week. I'm putting my email in the chat right now. If you want to send me an email, I would love to. I'd love to have you reach back. You said said yesterday you'd be willing to do that. So let's get you on the program next week to talk about it. Kevin, I want to give you the final bite at the apple here. I think we covered most of the things that were in that article, but there's something we didn't hit. Again, my takeaway from this is we need to be focusing on outcomes and not
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And not on the funding, but I'll give you the final word.
Yeah, thanks. So in our legislature right now, who advocates for the kids? Who stands up on the floor and talks about kids' outcomes and the outcomes? I think, Senator Begich was very good about that in the Reads Act, and they hammered out that Reads Act, and he actually stood up many times. I saw him and talked about how important it was for our children to be able to learn to read by 9 years old or third grade, right? So, unfortunately, there's nobody in either body right now that stands up and talks about the kids. And none of the school administrators that come in, with the exception of the Matsu school district, comes in and talks about the kids. They all talk about, hey, we have this big building we need to heat. We have this roof falling in. We need generators here, emergency backup generators. We need you to pay for the roof that we put on 5 years ago, or we need you to pay for the 15% increase we just gave our teachers in their new collective bargaining agreement. At what point do they say, hey, you know what, maybe we should reserve some money to plow the roads to the school, or maybe the potholes that prevent the teachers from driving into the parking lot need to be repaired, or they have to realize that at some point the state is going to be dry of money. And I don't know, is this the last gasp that they have to get the final little piece of blood or a little bit of blood out of the turnip before the state goes belly up?
We got to get the getting while the getting's good, right? We're going to take that last gasp out of the last hit on the thing before we walk out the door. I mean, that's kind of where it's, and that's what it feels like. Again, we're going to get deeper into this whole thing on the oil pricing next week. But it's kind of scary when you look at it and you realize, and the numbers, Brad and I were already talking about this yesterday off the air, and he already sent me he did some maths on this. And again, we're going to be 16% under the spring forecast right now. The last spring forecast based on that. If oil drops down that much, it's not $1 billion deficit, $1.5 billion. We're talking about closer to 1.7, maybe $1.8 billion in deficit next year.
Right.
Well, that's all of the remaining PFD. That's everything in the remaining PFD plus some. Where
Right.
are they going to come up with it? Where are they going to find another $1,000 increase to the BSA? Right. Which is another $1,000 increase to the BSA is another $400 million. Where are they going to find that?
Right. And it's what the fiscal policy working group said. We need to find ways to cut the budget, but we also need to find new revenue. And we talked about a number of things. And we talked about taxes, but one of the other things we talked about is mining, timber, gas. We need to find more sources of revenue, and that's what we're desperate for. But unfortunately, there's going to be a gap. There's going to be a gap between next year and 2033, where we're going to be in these budget discussions that, frankly, are just going to suck, and we're going to have issues. But once we can get some more oil in the pipeline, once we can get some more varied resource development, antimony, critical minerals, Ambler Mining District. I had a big meeting yesterday on biomass and sustainable aviation fuels. Once we can get there, maybe we can relieve ourselves of this dependency on oil. At least that's my hope. But
well, it's a big hope. Let's put it that way. It's a big hope.
Right.
All right. Kevin McCabe, thank you, Kevin, for coming on board and sharing with us. We appreciate you being part of it today.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate you coming in. All right, folks, that's us for today. We will see you guys tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Please like and share, follow, ring the bell, subscribe, share it with everybody else you know. We will see you guys mañana. Have a good one.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.